If you're ever in Canterbury or surrounding areas, I suggest you stay away from Clowes Woods. It's very small and unremarkably unexceptional compared to some of the other woods in the area, so most people tend to avoid it. This made it the perfect place for an impromptu camping trip. For me to get away from it all, it's actually quite dense woodland if you get right into it. From giving you the feeling of utter isolation from the rest of the world. This made it the perfect spot, or so it seemed. There's a reason why Clowes Woods has been left very untouched for decades. There's a reason why the local people choose to avoid it. Hell, the road leading to it hasn't been used in so long that the overgrowth has claimed it. But we'll get into that later. The day had dawned, the car was packed, and the drinking had begun. The journey wasn't smooth as one would have hoped. The road which leads to Clowes Woods was a lot worse than I had anticipated. It was in the state of complete despair, with weeds and brambles completely immersing it. I had to leave my car in the closest spot I could find and walk the rest of the way, which wasn't easy with the gear I had. This was really a laborious task. The forest was thick and unforgiving, leaving me scratched and bruised from the battles with the foliage. I had a small knife with me, which I used to hack through the brush, but it was still a challenging task. I was beginning to get a bit nervous at this point. I had never been camping by myself before, especially in the middle of the woods. But I decided now was a good time as any to prove that I could do it. Dad and I just watched 20 episodes of Bear Grylls the night before. I figured, hey, if he can do it, then why can't I? Still, I couldn't shake the feeling of unease. Clowes Woods is very quiet, almost silent, in fact. If you're expecting to hear birds singing or the local wildlife going about their day-to-day, but there was nothing. It seemed if I was the only living thing in the forest. It was a hard feeling to shake, but I stayed rational and told myself to stop being stupid, so I kept going. As luck would have had it, after only about an hour's walk, I managed to find a great clearing to set up camp in. It was probably about 30 feet in diameter and almost a perfect circle, with one solitary tree off to the north, just breaking the line of other trees. There was no interesting rock formations around 30 feet away from it. It looked like some sort of sculpture. It had a large spherical rock on top and a black cuboid. I marveled at it for a few seconds. Before moving on, I decided to set up camp here. Darkness was creeping in, as was the general panic at the very thought of having to set up my tent blind. This seemed like the best spot I would find. I'm not even sure what time of day it was. The forest canopy was so dense, not a lot of light managed to see through. Luckily, my tent was just a pop-up which you needed to take down, so it was set up in no time. I called her Lucy. I said, chuckling to myself, she was big enough to fit 3 men. She was big enough to fit 3 men as well. So I giggled to myself for a little while, cursing the fact that there was no one around to hear my spectacular joke. I then grabbed my chair and started a fire and got to drinking. The tent was on my left, and the fire was dead ahead. You know, relief myself was behind me, and the thick tree line was all around. I still couldn't believe how dark that night was. The darkness was suffocating. I'm not sure if it was because I was nervous or what it was, but I felt as if I was grasping for air. I couldn't see past the fire. but I could barely even see my own tent for that matter. I tried to take my mind off things by carrying on with roasting the marshmallows and listening to music, but lo and behold, my phone was dead. Have you ever experienced a silence so intense that it's almost deafening? Have you ever heard a silence so intense that it was deafening? There was literally no noise anywhere. I could almost hear my insides working as I scoffed down marshmallows, desperately trying to fight off the overwhelming panic Agassiz downing upon me. All of the sudden, the silence was broken. There was a rustling of leaves about 10 feet from the right of me. I'm not sure it was my mind playing tricks on me or just ambience from the fire. I couldn't begin to imagine how much I must have looked like a deer in the headlights. At that moment, my head turned faster than a bullet leaves a gun. Seriously, I should have had sprained my neck or something from that because it was inhuman how fast I turned. I was straining my eyes and craned my neck. Desperately trying to identify what caused the noise. When I saw it, it was because it moved again. I noticed it stayed still. I would have missed it forever. I noticed it moved again. It had stayed still. I would have missed it forever. There was a tiny little bunny rabbit on the floor, hopping around without a care in the world. I breathed a sigh of relief. I cleaned my metaphorical shit from my pants and cackled to myself about being such a coward. I didn't sleep at all that night. It was too dark, too quiet. I felt I didn't know, which was hard to explain. I felt as if any moment someone or something could come out crashing to Lucy's lap to ambush me, but nothing came. My hand didn't leave the knife I placed under my pillow for 1 second. I assumed I felt like I had let myself down, like a frightened child calling out for his parents in the night. I felt like I had to talk to someone to get it out of my head. I summoned all my courage and decided to stay another night to get over my childlike fear of the dark. So that's exactly what I did. I was already on my way to my makeshift toilet because what I saw leaving my tent that morning would have caused my bowels to evacuate faster than a house on fire. The rabbit, which was so merely hopping around my tent that previous night, was dead. Couldn't have left at the base of the isolated tree. I couldn't have looked at it for long. It was making me feel ill. How can I have heard it hopping around but not getting sliced apart? Whatever it did, it must have been bigger than the rabbit, so surely it would have made more noise. I assumed it was just some sort of bird nesting in the tree, and it must have fell. That's really the only possible explanation. I never had been camping before on my own, so I had no idea how to pass time. So I decided to go for a quick explore. And what do you think I saw? You guessed it. More trees. There were a few interesting things. For example, I only had walked 30 feet or so and stumbled upon 2 perfectly spherical black rocks. It was about the size of an average football, nesting on top of another larger rock. This rock was similar to the first one. It was black and smooth, cuboid shape. Cuboid spear. It resembled more of a cuboid spear Strange feeling washed over my head. I have gotten myself lost. This was an extremely familiar, it was an extremely similar formation to the one I had seen yesterday, but I had gone the opposite way from my camp. I ran back to the brush. I assumed the other formation was. Luckily, I found it. I let out a sigh of relief, realizing I hadn't gone completely insane. I was intrigued now. I started running around the edge of the clearing. These formations, I managed to find two more. There was one to the north of the camp, one to the east, and one to the south, and one to the west. I admitted it. I should have been more wary, and I thought nothing of it and moved on. Besides, the darkness was creeping again. I wanted to get back to my camp safely. Darkness had truly came. It was awful. I wanted to leave and go back home, but I'll never find my way. The darkness had literally enveloped my camp. It was heavy, thick, suffocating. The silence was back as well. Something was different about the night. It was hard to put my finger around it. I had this overwhelming sense of dread. The fire was much smaller than last night as well, so I felt even more blind. The feeling of helplessness was getting me, and panic and was starting to take hold. I decided to have a little look around and seeing if I could see anything interesting. I was scanning the tree line. Something caught my attention. It was a dim light coming from the edge of the clearing. Roughly about 30 feet away from me. My peripheral vision just managed to pick it up. I strained my neck to see what it was, but unfortunately, it sunk back into the darkness. I hoped for some reason it could be another person, but natively, my knowledge was getting to me. Another speck of light appeared. I could only see it in my peripheral vision. I turned my head, but it was roughly 9 degrees away where the first one appeared. Again, I turned to look at it. I couldn't see it anymore. Wild thoughts started running through my head. At this point, who these people were. What were they doing here? What did they want from me? I even began to wonder if it was the rock formations were somehow illuminating white. But I dismissed it. And my heart stopped. It caught my eye. It was hard to make out exactly what it was, but I thought I saw since I only caught it for a brief moment. There was a silhouette of a person peering out. Behind the tree. The one tree I had chosen to camp. As soon as I looked at it, it disappeared, sneaking back behind the tree. It leapt out of the chair. I leapt out of my chair. My heart was racing. My limbs felt like jelly. Jesus, I was a mess. I felt all my blood rush to my head. I decided it was the best thing to do. Was to go back and try to get some sleep. I turned towards the tent and nearly blacked out. There was another one peering out at me from behind my tent. Again, I caught it for a brief second. I couldn't make out any feature. It was just a black humanoid mass. This thing was darker than anything I had. It seemed to emanate hatred and anger. In some way, at that time, I must have been emanating fear. I ran into my tent, pulled pulled the sleeping bag over my head and tried to sleep. Sunlight was burning upon me, my eyes open, dazed, confused, delirious. It took me a few seconds to remember where I was, but my surroundings were off. I wasn't lying down, but I was lying up against something. It took me a moment, but eventually I realized what was wrong. I was still in my sleeping bag, but I wasn't in my tent. My tent was dead ahead of me. The flap was ripped open. The flap was ripped open, and some of my stuff was stewed around the clearing. It finally dawned on me. I realized where I had looked up. I turned my head upwards towards the sky and confirmed my fears. I sat at the base of the tree. I sprung to my feet, and I was blind with terror. There was sticking out the tree was my knife. One word, leave. That's exactly what I did.